So week 2, Packers face off against the Atlanta Falcons after starting off 1-0, beating the Bears in Chicago. Great first game for Jordan Love of the season. And now we have a test in the Atlanta Falcons, who also started off 1-0, beating rookie Bryce Young 24-10 to start off their season last week. And so I want to give my entire preview of this game. I'll give a score prediction near the end. But if you guys are new here, I covered the Packers on this channel. So if you're into that kind of thing, feel free to subscribe. So when we look at this game, let's start off on the Falcons side of the ball with Desmond Ridder, this rushing attack, and how they sort of fare versus the Packers defense. I honestly think if you look at the Packers and their matchup in week 1 against the Chicago Bears, it's very similar to this matchup with the Falcons. The main reason being that the Bears are a very run-heavy team. They really want to run the ball. The Falcons, on the other hand, same thing. They run the ball a ton, and in week 1, that's pretty much all the Falcons did. They only passed the ball 18 times. Ridder went 15 for 18, only 115 passing yards. And then the running game, 26 carries, 130 yards, 5 yards a carry. So if you look at the Packers last week, going up against the Bears rushing offense, who ranked number 1 in the league last year, if you take away Justin Fields and his rushing stats, which clearly he had a somewhat nice day, 9 carries, 59 yards, the Packers held the Bears' backfield to only 3.15 yards a carry. So that's a very promising sight to see for a Packers run defense that has consistently struggled for years and years. But I do think this week 2 matchup against Bijan Robinson, top 10 pick this year, and Tyler Algier, who was really, really good last year, played great in week 1. It's going to be a tougher matchup this week, I believe, versus this Falcons rushing attack. But luckily, the Packers seem to be at least somewhat better versus the run than last year. I think that has a big part to do with Devontae Wyatt playing well, Lucas Van Ness, Colby Wooden, TJ Slayton, Kenny Clark. There's a lot of new young talent on this interior of the Packers defensive line. And in week 1, it seemed to go pretty well. It's going to be tough, though, here against the Falcons, who are very, very run-heavy. If we take a look at the personnel they use, they love to bring on tons of tight ends, tons of running backs. They had the most 22 personnel in the NFL last week, which is just 2 running backs on the field, 2 tight ends, which was at 10%. And then another interesting stat, they had the 4th most 21 personnel in the league last week, which is 2 running backs on the field at the same time with 1 tight end. So they love to run the ball. And so this is going to be another game where the Packers, if they want to win this game and not let it get out of hand, they got to stop the run. As I said, for years and years, it feels like this has been a Packers run D that just could not stop the run no matter what. Last year, we had that one insane game where the Eagles put up like 340-something rushing yards. And so we need to see, can the Packers in back-to-back weeks, keep the running game in check? Because if they can, this is a Falcons offense that I think is going to be slightly held back by Desmond Ridder. He is still a young player. He's only started in 1 game this season. But if you look at his average depth of target, it was 3.4 yards in week 1, which was 31st in the NFL. The only player, QB, who was worse than that in week 1 was Justin Fields. So in week 1 against the Packers, Justin Fields was sort of just dinking and dunking. I think he had a super low average yards per attempt, around 5 or so yards. And that looked to be what the Falcons offense is when they're not running the ball, which is sort of sad for guys like Drake London, one of the receivers who was on my fantasy team. He got 0 catches in week 1. I was hurting. He was in my starting lineup. Not doing that again this week, which means he'll probably go off, but I'm going to say no. But the Falcons, they have these top-tier receivers or pass catchers in Kyle Pitts, who is an insane talent, in Drake London, but they don't really care. They just want to run the ball. If you look at the receiving stats, Bijan Robinson, in his first game, had twice as many receptions as any other Falcons player. Here is I'll read it off right here, some of the Falcons receiving stats. Kyle Pitts, 2 receptions, 44 yards. Mac Hollins, 3 receptions, 31 yards. Bijan, 6 receptions, 27 yards. Algier, their other running back, 3 receptions, 19 yards. Drake London, 0. Straight 0. Luckily, I still won my fantasy matchup, so his 0 day, which basically was just as if I forgot to place someone there, I was still able to get the victory. But clearly, this is not a Falcons team that wants to come in here and pass the ball a ton. What I do wonder about this game is, let's say the Packers get off to a fast start and are up in this game, maybe even in the 3rd or 4th quarter. Can the Falcons, if they need to, get away from the run and find success in the passing game? Because as I said, they do have some very talented pass catchers that, even though they weren't superb because they didn't really get targeted in week 1, the Packers can't take those guys lightly. I'm curious to see if they're able to sustain success in their offense if they do get behind and have to rely on the pass. Can Desmond Ridder do that? I'm not too sure about that. I don't think this is a very explosive quarterback in Desmond Ridder. He hasn't really shown it up to this point in week 1. Of course, it was only one game, and because the Panthers only put up 10 points against the Falcons could consistently rely on the run. Another interesting thing to look at in this game is the Falcons' offensive line. So when you look at the Falcons' offensive line, they were okay in week 1. They allowed 4 sacks to the Panthers, which isn't great, but they only allowed 6 pressures. And I think when you look at that, the fact they only allowed 4 sacks on 6 pressures, typically you would see way more pressures for that amount of sacks. For example, the Packers had 36 pressures and 5 sacks against the Bears. But I think the reason is, when you look at this Falcons offense, is they barely passed the ball, only 18 total pass attempts in week 1. Compare that to Justin Fields, he had 37. So the Packers had a lot of opportunities to go back there and get pressure on Justin Fields. And then if you look at time to throw, Desmond Ridder had the 9th quickest time to throw in the NFL in week 1, compared to Justin Fields, who had the 27th ranked time to throw in week 1 among quarterbacks who had about 11.5 snaps, 11.6 snaps per PFF. So Desmond Ridder, when he was passing, was getting the ball out super quickly, which makes sense why he had such a low average depth of target. He's not really pushing the ball down the field, or he wasn't last week. And I would assume that if you're the Falcons, you saw the dominance that the Packers had when it came to rushing the quarterback in week 1. You'd assume they want him to get the ball out quickly again to sort of, stop that pass rush. Because if you're getting the ball out quickly, obviously these edge rushers, these interior defensive linemen, don't have the time to get to the quarterback and force pressure. So if the Packers, are able to hold him in the run, we're going to see if Desmond Ridder can beat the Packers. And I think that's the strategy the Packers defense needs to take. Obviously, if you can hold up this run game, congrats, because it's tough. They have 2 very, very talented backs, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Falcons are able to get a good amount of yards on the ground. If you look at the Packers' run defense week 1, even though they, as I said, they allowed about 3.15 yards to everyone not named Justin Fields, there were still a handful of runs where the Bears were able to get 5 to 10 yards multiple times. So I am curious to see if the Falcons run it consistently. Can the Packers consistently keep him intact there? I'm not too sure about that one. And now I want to move to the other side of the ball. So, of course, Jordan Love has an incredible week 1 performance. Best passer rating in the league. Love to see it. 123.2. Third highest yards per attempt. 9.1. He was pushing the ball down the field, not just taking tons of screens and checkdowns. And he also had the highest EPA per play among QBs in the NFL in week 1. So there's no doubt it was an incredible week 1 from Jordan Love. I even put out a poll yesterday, which lots of you guys voted in. I was just curious because I saw people talking about Josh Allen and Jordan Love. So I threw up a poll about who would you rather have, Jordan Love or Josh Allen? And let me just say, if I would have asked this question maybe 5 months ago, I would say it would be mainly Josh Allen. And of course, this is a Packers channel, so this is not your typical view of things. But 76% of Packers fans said they preferred Jordan Love. Only 24% picked Josh Allen. Maybe that has to do with Josh Allen and his terrible performance week 1. But I think that sort of shows that lots of Packers fans have confidence in Jordan Love after his first performance. And the only thing about the first performance that I am sort of just waiting to see more is the Bears were the worst team in the NFL last season. I'm not taking anything away from Jordan Love. I'm a huge, massive Jordan Love supporter. I believe he's going to be great, and I think his success will continue. But we do have to note that this was the worst team in the NFL last season. There's a reason they had the number 1 pick, and I know they were supposed to get a lot better this next year, and they could be a lot better than last year, because when you're dead last in the NFL and you get a lot better, you could still be, not even make the playoffs. And so I think that I'm just curious to see what can Jordan Love do against more top-tier defenses. The Falcons played really, really well in week 1. Only allowed 10 points to Bryce Young. But Bryce Young's a rookie. He's inexperienced. It's probably going to take him time till he really becomes, all that he's capable of becoming one day. But in week 1, he went 20 of 38, 146 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, with a 48.8 passer rating. If we look at the Falcons' coverage in week 1, their pass coverage, they were graded as the 4th best coverage in week 1. This largely had to do to the addition they brought in this offseason. Safety Jesse Bates from the Bengals, they paid him $16 million per year, and it paid off, at least in week 1. He had 2 interceptions, both of Bryce Young's interceptions he had, and he had one of the highest grades among safeties in the league. So Jordan Love needs to keep an eye on Jesse Bates because he is very good at just jumping routes. And I do think that's something that Jordan Love has done a pretty solid job at so far in his limited reps, is he seems to have a very solid understanding of coverages and knowing and locating where the safeties are, using his eyes to manipulate throws to sort of hold the safety or linebacker in a certain spot when he's waiting for his guy and the route to develop. He seems to be very good at that, and so I would assume that he's going to have a better day than Bryce Young, because it's funny now, Bryce Young only has one less start than Jordan Love, even though he just got drafted. Of course, Love sat for so long, but Love has had so much time to develop and learn, and I think we've witnessed just how much QB coach Tom Clements, his teaching and what he's done for Love, same as Aaron Rodgers being here for 3 years. Love looks very good in the pocket when it comes to reading the defense, and so I'm not saying Love's going to be perfect. He's probably going to make some mistakes at times, which every quarterback does. But I think when you compare Bryce Young in week 1 to Jordan Love in week 2, I do think this is a much tougher test for this Falcons defense. And as I was looking at these stats, part of me was wondering, okay, is the Falcons secondary elite, or is the Panthers offense just really bad? Right now, I'm not completely sure. Clearly, the Falcons have some talent in the secondary, but also the Panthers are still young and inexperienced, and so it could be a little bit of both. So we'll see this week. The big question right now is still some injuries with the Packers. Christian Watson is questionable. Just came out. I made a video on it recently. Aaron Jones, also questionable. Luckily, Christian Watson did practice today in a limited capacity, not fully practicing. I would lean towards Watson not playing just because he didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday. If he did play, I would guess it would be at a lower rate than usual, not like a full amount of snaps. Because if we look at last week, Romeo Doubs came back from his hamstring injury, and he only played in 48% of snaps. So I would assume if Watson is back, it'll be at a low amount of snaps, but I would sort of guess now he's not going to play. The other one is Aaron Jones. He, of course, injured his hamstring in that game against the Bears, and now he is also questionable. He didn't practice all week long. My guess would be he doesn't play on Sunday, which will be a big blow to this Packers offense, because most of the success the Packers offense had in week 1, I think, was due to Aaron Jones and what he was able to do. And so I made it clear yesterday, I think that if Aaron Jones doesn't play, the Packers need to really feed Emmanuel Wilson the ball a ton. He was inactive week 1, but I did find a quote yesterday from Packers offensive coordinator on Emmanuel Wilson. I want to read here. So this is from Tom Silverstein, who said, Packers OC Adam Stinovich said he has confidence that rookie running back Emmanuel Wilson is ready to play if Aaron Jones can't Sunday. He said he proved it to them late in camp that he was ready for a role if the opportunity came up. So A.J. Dillon only had 1.5 yards per carry in week 1. Lots of that had to do with the poor run blocking of the offensive line. There were multiple times where Josh Myers just whiffed on his blocks, more so I think than any other run blocker. But still, at the same time, A.J. Dillon, obviously he's built bigger, more physical back. He does just not have the explosiveness that Aaron Jones has. And I do think Emmanuel Wilson is the next best guy here when it comes to running back. I want to see what he can do, and I think that we saw what happened. The reason, when Aaron Jones didn't get the ball, why the Packers really slowed down a lot, is just because Jones can break it away at any time. He's so good at getting an extra, 3, 4, 5 yards just because of his elusiveness. And the Packers were missing that with A.J. Dillon and Patrick Taylor on the field. And I think Emmanuel Wilson can bring that factor. So if Jones is out, they got to feed Wilson. And if they do, I'm honestly not too worried about the Packers and their rushing attack. If we look at the Falcons and what they were able to do when it came to stopping the run, not much. That's what they were not able to do. Not much. If we look at the Panthers' stats, which I'm scrolling through trying to find them right here. Okay, so in week 1, the Panthers ran the ball for 154 yards at 4.8 yards per carry, which was the 7th best in the NFL. So the Panthers had a much better time running the ball against the Falcons' defense than passing the ball. And so I think that the Packers, they're going to try to rely on the run once again. They ran the ball. The Packers ran the ball more than they passed last week. 32 carries to, I think, 27 pass attempts. A lot of that had to do with the game at the end was out of hand. That we just kept running the ball. That was part of it. But the Packers, when we did run the ball, only ran the ball at 2.9 yards a carry. Aaron Jones had 9 carries at 4.6 yards per carry. But I think the Packers, once again, are going to want to rely on the run, set up the play-action pass, and allow Love to try to pick apart this defense. And now if we look at the offensive line matchup versus the Falcons were able to get consistent pressure on Bryce Young. They pressured him on 45.2% of snaps. and only 5 QBs were pressured at a higher rate in week 1 among guys who had around 11.6 snaps. So, guys who played a good amount of snaps at quarterback. So the Falcons pass rush played really well. They got most of their pressure from the interior. The Packers offensive line, of course, is one of the best in the NFL. Last week, Love did not get sacked, only allowed a few different pressures. And so I do think the Packers are much better in the pass blocking game than run blocking game. And I think that, well, yes, the Falcons found lots of success last week against the Panthers. I think the Packers have a better offensive line than the Panthers by a pretty wide margin. So I'm not too worried about Love back there, even though he could see some more pressures this week than he did last week. And all in all, it comes down to lots of these receivers who, if Christian Watson is out, lots of guys stepped up last week. Jaden Reed had a couple catches. Luke Musgrave. Dontavian Wicks, even though he didn't have any catches, he was open a few times, looked solid. And so I think that the Packers have enough talent here to still make this a very competitive game, even without Christian Watson or Aaron Jones. And I do trust Love. I do trust Love after watching him in week 1. So if I had to give my score prediction, it's going to be 24-17 Packers beating the Falcons. I just think after watching the Packers' dominant performance in week 1 against Chicago and really what we saw from Jordan Love, I do believe in this team and the energy they've brought, the physicality they brought on defense, and I think they're a better team than Falcons overall. Obviously, if Watson and Jones play, the chances of them winning goes up, but still without them, I think they got a shot. But that is my prediction. Let me know yours in the comment section down below. If you haven't subscribed, you want to stay up to date with all Packers content, feel free to subscribe. But that is it for this one, and I'll see you guys next time.